I love cinema, and I was just realizing now, looking at some files, that a movie script, the text for a movie script, has a file that is much smaller than a movie itself. That's rather obvious because we are comparing a digital video format with a text format. But the differences are remarkable. I was looking at the script for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Very nice script. And also the one for Pulp Fiction. But the Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, the script, the file I have happens to be 222 kilobytes. I don't have the digitized movie with me here, but I know a movie digitized in high definition is at least 2 gigabytes per hour. So this movie being around 2 hours, we will need 4 gigabyte, more than 4 gigabytes for the movie itself. So we have here, on the one hand, 207K, and on the other, 4 gigabyte. That's a huge difference. 0.2 megabytes versus 4 some gigabytes. The ratio is about 20,000. 4 times 10 to the 9 divided by 2 times 10 to the 5. That gives us 2 times 10 to the 4, 20,000. So the file size, the information, I can have the digital information for the script and for the movie, and the movie is 20,000 times bigger. Now this has some implications because I could have 20,000 movie scripts in text form in the same space that is required by just one movie. Now that's just an issue of storage. But then the other issue is our minds, how we relate to these two things, reading versus watching a movie. And I would like to posit that the 20,000 difference is the difference between what our mind creates reading as opposed to what our mind needs to do watching the movie. Watching the movie, we are much more entertained. We don't create, we just see it in front of us. We can add and imagine things, but there's so much information in those 4 gigabytes that every bit is filled. When I read in the beginning of Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it starts at this train station as opposed to an earlier scene in the real movie. And then it goes to the beautiful beaches scenes, and the beaches scenes, it says the character is looking at the ocean. That's all what it says. The character is looking at the ocean. It's just one phrase. Now that as a clip will be a big file, but also a lot of visual information. We see the ocean, we see the sun, we see what kind of surf there is, we see this man, we see how he looks like, how he's moving. Whereas if I'm telling you the man looks at the ocean, you imagine everything. And that's powerful, that's amazing. And we might even have more empathy for the man when we don't have all the details because we create the man to our liking. I'm going to think of a man that I find pleasant to look at as opposed to a man I don't like. So I'm going to be much more engaged with this character. So I'm making this assertion that our minds are having 20,000 times more creativity when reading a book, a story, a script, as opposed to watching a movie. And the more detail there is, the more definition there is, the more colors, the less our imaginations are working. I remember being at the Pixar workshop where every director that had made a Pixar movie by that time was present, and all of them talk about their approach to making movies. This workshop was at the Venice Cinema Festival about 10 years ago. And there was somebody, I mean, these were all American directors, and some European guy stood up and asked this very pointed question about the computer animation having so much detail, being so much lifelike, that it was taken away from the ability of kids to imagine and create. Because the old cartoons, the simple animation, created room for kids to imagine. And his question was kind of dismissed by whoever happened to address it. It was the same old attitude that, we make something and how it's used is not really a responsibility. I have heard this argument so many times. I remember von Braun, the Nazi, the scientist who came from Nazi Germany straight to work for NASA. We forget that the story, the man who was behind the design and the making of the rockets that took the first Apollo spacecrafts to the moon. He was the same man who had designed the V1 and V2 rockets that the Nazi Germany shot mostly into England. And when he was asked about the implication of his work, the making of the rockets that were destructive, he said, well, that's the way men use that for. But I just make rockets. And this is a very prevalent attitude among scientists and some artists and creators. We have a full range here from rockets to movies. So that 20,000 is something to keep present, how remarkable it is that there is such a difference. And I can see the experience, I can see the beauty of a movie, all what it conveys, especially when it lacks in words and it's more about just images. A very different experience from reading the text. But we have to be aware of that, how we are putting less of our own, less creativity, less empathy when we are with the moving image, and the more detail it has, the less we put in, as opposed to reading a text and interpreting the text and creating in our mind, in minds, imagining all what's happening. Maybe I should look for the script and read a specific section and yeah, here is the scene number 4. It says exterior beach day. That's the way you talk in movie scripts. I know what it says for that scene is Joel looks out at the ocean. That's all. That becomes a scene in the movie. Maybe I'm going to create a short video with that scene and compare it to that text. Joel digs into the sand with a stick. That's another scene. Now, speaking of maybe a few other issues that come to mind talking about books and the like, we have this issue about books and how inaccessible they are. I guess pretty average price for a paperback book is in the United States is, let's say, 15, 20, $25. And that limits the diffusion of a book greatly. And you had to wonder whether the pricing is right, whether there could be other ways to price books to make them more accessible, while at the same time the creators and the distribution companies make some profit. What would happen if the digital version of a book was $1 or even 10 cents? If it was that accessible? Wouldn't we be all downloading lots of copies? And then the printed copy could still be $20, 25, or maybe the printed copy could be more, and if there will be an acknowledgement that the printed copy is helping diffuse the digital copies, and printed copies could be maybe with higher quality and have more illustrations. We need to diffuse culture. We need to diffuse knowledge a lot more. Last book I read was The Overy Story, and I wish more people had access to that book. Maybe more people would download the books and try to read them and work on them. I'm tempted to think of a system to put more books out there. What would happen if I take a book and I scramble the words and create a digital key to unscramble the book? Then it wouldn't be illegal to put up a scrambled book because I'm not violating copyright but drastically changing the work. And the key could be floating somewhere else separately to unscramble the book. God, I'm going back to the days where I wrote patents and tempted to write a patent again for a system to scramble texts and unscramble with a key. And this is not for hiding content, but for diffusing content in a legal manner by separating the unscrambling key from the scrambled text and letting them float in a way where they can come together, not that difficult and not that hard. The other issue with the diffusion of text is the issue of copyright. When it comes to patents that protect ideas, like for technology, for drugs, for methods of doing things, for a lot of the economy, patents have basically, they last for 17 years. And that is from the moment a patent is applied for, so it may be even a shorter period from the moment the patent is issued. So there are lots of things, drugs that are now public domain, and very important patents that are public domain only 17 years after they were invented. There are already patents from this century, from the early 2000s, that are public domain, and somebody can use them to make something that is of great value. So we are perfectly happy with people exploiting in exclusivity the rights for something they invented for 17 years. Now, when it comes to patents, we have a very different situation. For copyrights. Copyrights protects text, movies, that form of creativity. Copyrights right now in the United States are a whopping 95 years. They call this the Disney laws because Disney has tried to extend the Mickey Mouse patents over and over and over and over time. The laws had other names, and the last law was 1998, and that's the one that extended the rights to the life of the author plus 70 years. I mean, that's for an author. The 95 years is for corporate publications. That's the case for Mickey Mouse. So Mickey Mouse, that was created in 19... when was it created? Don't remember. The 1920s something. I think Mickey Mouse is going to become public domain. I don't remember reading. I think 2020 something, 2023, 24. So Mickey Mouse has only like 3 years left before the first Mickey Mouse movie becomes public domain. Of course, later movies are going to take longer to become public domain. And there are all kinds of other convoluted protections that Disney has created for all kinds of other Disney products. But here we're talking about an animation that is almost 100 century old and is still, the rights are still private and not public domain. And the same applies to books. I was saying the life of the author plus 70 years. So something what I'm saying now is mine and is protected by copyright from now, the rest of my life plus 70 years. It could be a century. It could be more than a century. Imagine an 18-year-old writing something. Somebody putting up a video on the web right now who is 18 and is going to live 70 more years. And then they will live 70 other years after they die. That video is protected for 140 years. I'm not that concerned about the video uploaded to the web, but think of a text, the beautiful story somebody wrote, and imagine somebody writing this magnificent story that could be life-changing, and they do it at a very early age. It could be a song that is incredible, and they are so young, and this is going to be protected for over 100 years before it can be diffused freely and everybody enjoy it. There's a huge dichotomy here. We're talking about 17 years for patents and about a century or more for texts and movies and that form of creativity. Why this discrepancy of more than 5 times? I guess I'm going and insisting from several angles on the importance of text for our minds, for our creativity, for us to imagine, for us to empathize, for us to transcend, and then the need for accessibility for these very texts that are so easy to transfer. An email can send an entire book very easily. But there's this recondite protection where it keeps this under lock, literally, for a century. Liberate books, please. Liberate books and read, enjoy books.